All right, we're online. Do you want to do the intro for this one?
Sure. Hey everyone, welcome. This is Baron. I am here with Jorgen, and we are here with our newly named Coffee and Chaos podcast, complete with coffee.
Yeah, and it's 8 p.m. here, and I'm still 8:30. I'm still drinking coffee.
Hey, it's 6:30 over here, so at least I'm allowed to be drinking coffee.
Exactly, but technically it's coffee o'clock somewhere in the world, even if it's the opposite side of the. Sorry. Anyway, I just like coffee. Okay, so we decided that this would probably be a more consistent. We'll try it. We'll see how we go with this video, and then potentially, if you guys in the comments below want to see us do this live moving forwards, we'll set up the cues and all the rest of it. I'll even wear a nicer shirt if I have to. Baron's outperforming me in that department right now. But
It's a t-shirt, for God's sake.
I've got R2D2 on mine. Anyway, so the topic for today that we're going to go through is basically just talking about lab. There'll be a description name. We didn't really name the episode per se, and this I guess we'll take as episode 2 because we've sort of got one that we did first time around, so we'll do it as EP2. So we got 10 key points to talk about: labs versus trials, or trials versus labs, whichever is your affinity, whether it be POE 1 or 2. And we're going to talk through some of the divisive stuff that exists currently around lab or trial, and then basically talk about our experiences, progression, the RNG that comes with running labs these days. Whether or not you like that, we're going to talk. Whether or not you have a preference to RNG being in a lab, we're going to talk about that. But anyway, to lead us into the first question, Baron, what was your first experience with labs and trials?
Yeah, so when I started playing Path of Exile 1, lab was already a thing, and I know yours is different, but for me, lab was already a thing. So I was in Act 3, Act 4, my first ever playthrough, and I encountered lab. I'd read enough in advance to know that I should be looking out for these trials. You know that how you have to find the trials throughout the campaign in order to actually do the lab. So I was ready for it, but I remember being very lost, not getting the map system and the connected room system, and I would like find myself going in circles that very first time. Uh, but so that's the bad. But the good was the atmosphere. I remember was nuts. Like when I wasn't even playing the game, that thing that happens when you are really into something new for the first time, and your brain is like dwelling on it even when you're not doing
Yep.
it. When I was dwelling on PoE, I would be thinking about like the music and the atmosphere from Labyrinth. Like I even had it as my hideout music for a while. Uh, Camille Orman Janowski, composer for PoE, dude is clutch at creating atmosphere. So like, yeah, I just had this incredible sense of like vibe to it. So yeah, that's me. What about you?
I with PoE One's lab, I think we were talking about just before we started recording, which was I sort of used to play PoE in between things, and then PoE became like a main thing for me a few years after the full release and whatnot after 1.0. But yeah, no, the first time I sort of logged back in and I was like, what's going on? And I can't remember if it was the Trials of Ascension League that I actually played or if it was like one or two leagues later. But the most interesting thing that I remember about lab was trying to get like first thing was like doing lab, which was pretty crazy when you initially did it because Izaro, as far as anyone's concerned, is a totally kick-ass boss. Um, and then like the craziest thing though was like I think we are just talking about the old global 820 system. So for anyone who's listening or whatnot, we were just having a chat about the old like you literally had to be able to do your 6 trials. I got it on screen here for your Uber Labs. You actually had to do the 6 trials via like a rota system, and basically yeah, you would have to then punch in / global 820, go into a rota channel, and then basically see if you could find someone to sell it to you at the end of the day. Or it used to be free, like you used to just join in. But yeah, what was your experience with the rota system, Baron?
Yeah, no, I mean that you had to do it. I remember when we talk about the balance, like the balance of your character versus lab, a lot of people in PoE2 complain that like when you first get to a lab, you're not strong enough for you. Like you've got to wait. and get overpowered. It was like the reverse for your fourth and final, what we called our Uber lab in PoE 1, where you might be like level 90, still trudging through maps trying to get that fifth and sixth trial that you needed. Because for anybody who didn't play at that time, keep in mind, it was totally RNG. These trials could show up in a map or not. I think it was still the same 8% chance for a trial to show up in a map, although I don't think I knew that at the time. And then there was a 1 in 6 to get the trial. So yeah, that's why you'd have to hang out in global chat and somebody would be like, "Hey, I've got 4 portals left for this specific trial. You needed the 6 specific ones." Yeah, that was a hassle. And when they changed that, that was welcome.
It was a welcome change, but to be honest with you, I sort of miss that thing about Path of Exile. It's very like like we were talking about earlier, like the PoE lab guy. Like for anyone who doesn't know, in Path of Exile 1, there's this guy that's been doing it for years, and he basically runs every lab every single day. It's on a timer, and he updates the lab. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, he's been a bit inconsistent for personal reasons, which he's got on his an update on his website for. And we'll put a link in the description to it actually. But there's just that element of so much community that used to exist around it, and it's something I don't see in Path of Exile 2.
Good point.
Mm. It sort of feels like, and it's sort of, this is this I guess a bit of a segue into the PoE 2 trials conversation that comes with this topic. Is like yeah, well, I'll let you go. You give me your first experiences of trials and Path of Exile 2.
Yeah, good point. Obviously, this is fresher in both our memories.
Mm.
So my first experience with Sekima, I felt like, so here's the thing. Obviously, as Path of Exile 1 players, we were vibing a little bit. Like we knew. So Sekima is Sanctum from PoE 1, and Chaos is Ultimatum from PoE 1. So we had a little bit of that experience already. I liked the feel, and we'll get into more of this in some of the other questions. I like the feel of Sanctum, but when we first encountered Sekima in PoE 2, it was overtuned as hell. It was really rough, and that was frustrating because like I could see the skeleton of something, the outline of something that I thought could be really good, and it just wasn't there yet on that first playthrough. And they've made some changes, and I've learned, you know, some of the differences between it and Sanctum and how to run it better. But that like I had a more positive experience with my first Sekima than I did with my first Chaos, which is never mind that. Uh, Little thing fell in the background here. First experience with Chaos was underwhelming. It was meh. I don't know. Like I died the first time. That probably didn't help, but it was yeah, it was just Ultimatum in a slightly bigger stage. And it just didn't give me as much of a vibe of atmosphere as the others. What about you?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I sort of come back to is like when even to this day when I run a lab in PoE 1, I always get excited when I have to fight Izaro. Not necessarily because he's hard. Like sometimes it like he's a total gear check through the campaign, and that's the thing that I love about it. So like you walk in, and it's like where there's a gold key, there's a gold door. Like you remember the voice lines, everything. Everything about
The
lab
voice
is
lines
memorable.
every
Like,
time.
and it's just like, I'm gonna take you down, Izaro. Like, there's just everything about it is just memorable. The first time I ran the trials, like for me, the biggest issue I have with the trial system is I wasn't a Sanctum player, and I didn't really play Sanctum League for Sanctum. I just delved in Sanctum League, which is what I do most leagues. But Ultimatum, I actually really like. I made an Ultimatum build in 3.2, I think 3.26, 3.25 for Path of Exile 1. And
You
there was on cast on stun build that just stands in the thing. The thing about Ultimatum though is like it was so much better in Path of Exile 1, and it feels like putting it as a like a carryover mechanic in lab makes it feel cheap. And that's the issue with I guess what I currently have with the way that trials work. Even the trials of Sekima, like we sort of ported it over and we call it a different thing. And like it is different to what Sanctum was in Path of Exile 1 to quite a varying degree. But the biggest issue that I have, and this is the thing that I felt when I first saw the trials of Sekima, even in the announcement, was that it's a mechanic that is designed for a specific play style, and that's the issue that I've got with it. That's the problem that exists in my mind with it. Same with Ultimatum, and we used to make very specific builds, and even in Path of Exile 2, there's very specific builds that excel in either or. And we don't have the last two trials, so we don't know what they are yet. Lab, though, in PoE 1 could be done by any build, and it had to be done by any build. And that's the beauty of Lab. It was so generic but unique at the same time. But then what I see in PoE 2 is like, do we do we need to put in all the content from Path of Exile 1? Or could there have been something that could have been added to Path of Exile 2 that could have been new and fresh?
Well, for better or for worse, I mean, like I can see both sides of this. I think it seems pretty clear that at least Sanctum Secima. I don't know about Ultimatum Chaos, but Sanctum Secima seems pretty clear to me was a test run for the Ascendancy. Like, if you go back and you look at how it looked on launch, you can almost see the idea of this being in Path of, just a testing ground.
Yeah.
And some people are opposed to that. I don't know if I'm like as viscerally opposed. Like, I get that they might need to reuse assets, but I see where you're coming from. It's
Mm.
a little frustrating that they reuse that.
Yeah. Like Chaos Trials, like I my preference is Chaos Trials because I can just tank everything. Secma is not my jam. But there's a like yourself. I know you like Sekma over Chaos, which and that I guess also moves into the affinity of what you prefer to play in the game as well, which is a little different to how I play the game, and that's pretty normal across the board in Path of Exile. The
Oh
interesting,
yeah.
it's just to me it was a really interesting decision that they went with to put Sanctum as like a mechanic for in particular approaching for new players in particular, where you've got a mechanic where until we learnt about honor resistance and things like that, a lot of people, you just get hit and you're dead, and that's the biggest beef that I have with the mechanic. If that honor system wasn't actually in it, and they just beefed up the difficulty with the gauntlets and whatnot, I'd actually feel more at home in that mechanic, and I'd be like, all right, I died, I deserved it, sort of thing. And that's where it's sort of
Yeah, this is very much the sort of thing where I should emphasize the difference between something that I personally like and something that I feel is a good, strong, general purpose game system.
yeah,
Fully acknowledge that this needs some work for it to be a strong, any player, especially because it's your first encounter with the Ascendancy system. This is the first thing that you're ever going to try.
yeah.
Um, maybe it would have been better to do chaos first, since that's more of like a general purpose, just like don't die, just kill the monsters, don't die. So I don't know, but this does kind of segue us towards our second question about choice and variety
Yes.
in PoE 1 versus 2.
Yeah. Do you want to take this one? You can start us off.
Sure. So yeah. So we're going to discuss PoE2's multiple trial options, and we're going to talk about, is more variety a better experience? You can have, at the moment, you have two choices. I've heard a rumor of a third one, and it sounds like, Jorgen, you've heard maybe even up to four different options eventually. For PoE2 versus PoE1, which only has you choose to ascend one way, you go to the labyrinth. And should PoE1 have adopted the multiple choice approach? So what do you think?
I so my view of lab is probably the thing that dictates the approach that should be taken with it in my mind. So the way that I see lab is it is a build progression device more than it is a farmable mechanic. But there's caveats to that. So Path of Exile 2, obviously, there was an element of it in the end game, right? So you could do Uber Labs, or you could do was it level 84 labs with the elevated offerings and stuff like that. And I feel like that was a good approach to it. And the reason why I like the way that it was done in PoE 1 was because you weren't like struggling to. So it's like the chicken and the egg scenario. Like as a build creator, as a main cast build creator, the biggest issue I see with the way that Lab currently works and the level of progression and the level gating that exists with Lab is around the fact that you sort of need the ascendancies for your build to come online, because Path of Exile 2 versus number one in that endgame is not the easiest game compared to PoE. Some people would disagree with that. That's great. I have a different view on that, and I've got all of my builds now to level 90, doing T15 plus content and everything else. The biggest thing is like, for example, in many builds, you need all four ascendancy points to actually be able to survive in T15s sustainably and easily enough, without building anything else into it. Like that's your entry level to be able to do T15s consistently. The problem with the current system in PoE2, the way that I see it, is it's overtly difficult to be able to complete labs, especially if it's like your third or fourth ascendancy and your character's not geared enough. And so then you're going to be farming much of your end game on two ascendancy sort of ascensions, which is going to severely underpower you, and it's going to prohibit you from getting the currency to be able to gear up to then do lab anyway. So it's like a self-deprecating problem. Whereas in PoE 1, there's a clear line of progression. You get to about level 75 or so, you do your final lab, but you could do lab all the first three labs pretty easily before you had to do the last lab. And the last lab just had you complete maps until you found, your offerings, right? So, or you delve for offerings. Offerings could drop anywhere. And then when you were ready, you take it on, and then that's your last point. You progress, and then you power through, and by that point, you're probably in like T4 or 5 or 6 maps, and then you can continue to progress. That it's really we have a question down here further around level scaling and progression, and we'll probably focus on it there. But that's the issue that I currently see. I don't necessarily think variety is bad, but I think the way that it's been approached with the type of variety, like being, the sanctum mechanic and the ultimatum mechanic, I sort of feel like sort of like a nostalgic throwback. But like if the main market that GGG is focusing is a new market, then does it really matter if that was a mechanic from Path of Exile 1? And could that have been something totally different? And that's that, yeah. But anyway, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I like the variety. I like the idea of the variety. It may be that Sekima in particular is too niche. And you know what? Maybe we'll feel differently about it when the third or potentially even fourth, if that's the case, comes out and there's even more variety. The thing about the choice is, and you talked about the difficulty. That's a good segue for me. Is there's a little bit of a false choice with your first couple ascendancies because you're highly incentivized to do first one then the other, to do Sekima then Chaos, because for anybody who doesn't know this, you get to do the easy introductory version of those if you do your second trial as Chaos. Whereas if you try to keep going with Sekima, you don't get to do the first easy one again. You got to progress to the next harder one. So it's it's a choice, but it's incentivized. You know what? I wonder, will they even give us the opportunity to do yet a third easy introductory version for our third trial once they introduce the next? I mean, that might be a way of, I don't know, making it feel a little bit better. But yeah, I think Sekima might be a little too niche as it stands right now, as only one of two. I like it, so that doesn't bother me. Um, the idea of there being multiple choices, I think, is really cool. Choose your own adventure. If you don't like, imagine if you didn't like Labyrinth. There's plenty of people who are like, "Oh God, Lab again" in PoE 1. But what if you could, during an endless delve event, you could just delve until you got your Labyrinth points, right? It just popped up. So what if you could do that? I don't know if, even though I like the idea of variety, if it needs to go back to PoE 1. Like, sure, if grinding gear games were feeling spicy and they wanted to add in some other system for ascending, I guess I wouldn't complain. No skin off my nose. But we've talked before about how each game is unique. And we usually talk about that in the sense of like not porting over everything from PoE
Yeah.
1 to 2. The same is true in reverse too, though. Like not everything needs to get backported. QO, quality of life stuff, sure, fine, no problem. Like the stuff coming next week with being able to interact with strong boxes and essences and stuff without opening your inventory. That's QOL that if they wanted to bring back to PoE 1, no problem, bring it on. But not every little thing, I don't think, needs to get backported.
Yeah, I think it's interesting your comment there about the progression of the lab. So yeah, you're right. So about level 21 is when you do SECMA, 21 to 22. So when the token drops. And then Chaos is obviously in Act 3. And then you can't really do the labs until you get to like level 65, 75 beyond that point, like, or the trials, sorry. Um, and that's what's really interesting. So, is it the case that we simply just have too incomplete of a game right now to actually be able to progress the lab the way that it was intended, or the lab system and ascendancies? And you might actually, and I didn't think about this until you made the comment, you might actually be on the money with that comment. So the third one is theorized to be Toda. Um, and
Trial of the Ancestors.
exactly, and say that was like level 48, or that was like level 52 or something like that, right? By the time you get to 52, then you get your third lab through there. And the fourth one, we don't know what it is. I suspect it could be a rehash of the Eternal Lab and Izaro returns. Or I think we got that as a later question. But like that could be the level like 65 plus ascendancy. And I think like they've got the wiggle room now to make these changes because we're still absent the last three acts. So we're still missing 50% of the campaign content, 50% of the maps, and 50% of the trials system as well. So it might actually not be a bad, like it could actually be the scenario where right now we're playing an escalated difficulty, but we might actually end up getting an easier system when the rest of the content's delivered. And that could actually be the current problem with the way the lab's set out, because there's only two instead of the four that was supposed to come out in total across the whole game. And that could actually be the like the missing link in the way that labs currently work. And maybe that's just really optimistic, an optimistic way of looking at it.
Maybe. But it wouldn't be the first time, right, that we came across something that, like, we talked about in our last episode that, like, it's just hard to see how much better things could be if you just add these little pieces that you maybe don't know are coming.
Mm.
So let's see. Do you want to anything more on number two, or do you want to take the next one?
Let's go to number three. So, which of the current trials is your favorite or least favorite, and why? We added here, say something critical about your favorite and something nice about your least favorite. Um, so I obviously like. So we're on the opposite ends of the shoe with this one. So I like chaos
Yep.
trials, right? Um, I like to tank stuff, and I like right now my current my what I call my trample shot build is basically like three hitting the bosses at level 80, which is awesome. Um, I like it for the element that you can tank stuff, but I dislike it for the RNG, which we'll talk about further down. The RNG system in Ultimatum is horrific. The options are so brutal sometimes. If you get all red, you are essentially screwed. Like you might as well just pack up, restart the lab, and call it a day. And sometimes, yeah, like no flash charge regeneration is horrifically bad because there's not enough mechanic in the game for regeneration or mana sustain to allow you. And it's actually not even the way the game is currently designed to allow you to sustain it without having your flash charges. So yeah, that's probably the really unabridged response there. Um, but what about yours? What's your? I guess we'll just talk about. You're the opposite end of me. So what do you love about Sekma and what do you dislike about it?
Yeah. So what I like about Sekima is honestly something that I like about ARPGs in general, and something we talked a lot about in the last episode, is this idea that I can get better through gearing. And in fact, there is even a new axis of increasing my power where I can get better with these relics. Like you said, you talked about honor resistance and increased maximum honor. In fact, I would even go so far as to say I don't know of any other mechanic in Path of Exile where you can so straightforwardly get better at that specific mechanic by farming that specific mechanic. I could go to an early trial right now, get a bunch of relics, and there's a half decent chance that just by farming that early trial, even if I die, I may have picked up a relic that has increased honor resistance and I can go back and get better at it. So, like, that always appealed to me. And like there's just something fun and different about the puzzle and choice system. The like I'm having to plan ahead, thinking like, all right, I have to go this way. I have to take this little affliction, but I can get the merchant there. It's like it's just a different mindset, a different strategy. It shakes things up. With that said, fully willing to acknowledge that the affliction system, oof, I mean, like, you talk about RNG and chaos, we've got the same complaint here. It is so easy to get a run bricking, like, something that you couldn't have chosen differently, you couldn't have done anything about, you just happen to come across a pathway where you have 2 absolutely run bricking afflictions, and that's it. You see that and you're like, "Well, I guess I'm not gonna start over. I'm gonna keep playing. I'm gonna see if I can grind through it, maybe get a relic drop," but you get that sinking pit in your stomach, like, "Oh, man." So, yeah, I could do with a little tuning of the affliction system, like, I've talked about balance around carrot instead of balance around stick, and we're gonna talk about RNG again, like, I'm cool with the idea of room to room RNG, but make it, like, skew it more towards, like, I can get good in this specific way by going to this room, or I can get good, roguelite style, in this specific way by going to that specific room. Anyways, the other half of this question was, all right, now you gotta say something, nice about you're gonna go with Second, I'm gonna go with Chaos, so after you.
Look, I think it is an interesting mechanic. It's definitely easier to do first up when you're starting your ascension journey. I usually, to be honest with you, I do it as my first and third ascendancy every single time. So, and this sort of comes back to like it's just consistent. It's relatively straightforward. It's once it gets past the third like set of trials, that's when I'm like, this is a bit egregious. Um, so the positive, I guess, is like it is much easier to progress once you understand how it works, the honor resistance sort of system work, yeah, and how that works. It is the better of the two systems to be able to progress to your upper ascendancies. Um, the obvious negative is I just don't like Sanctum. Like you could take
Yeah.
that for what it is. Like I was never a Sanctum player in PoE 1 because I'm not a roguelite player, but I know like yourself, you are, and there's tons of people that are, and
And,
100%.
like, the thing is, I don't play roguelikes in my spare time so much, I
Mm.
just in the context of Path of Exile, I enjoy it.
It works for you, and that's the thing that matters. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing about Path of Exile. It's a game made for all different types of players, and that's the beauty of it. And that's why the choice element of it is really good. But what are your positive and negative about Ultimatum or Chaos?
Yeah, yeah, Ultimatum Chaos, so I think what it's got going for it is to a much higher degree than Sekima, in my opinion. You can be good at it just by improving your build in a very straightforward way. Like, you don't necessarily need to build this like hyper specific sanctum runner or even lab had that was more for farming, but there were lab farmers. Like, you
Yeah,
can just build a generically strong build and either kill the ultimatum enemies faster than they can kill you, or like you do, tank through them. Now I agree with you that there's still some work they could do, like some of the RNG, some of the downsides are pretty egregious, but overall, I do like the idea that there's an option for people who want this. Like, they don't want to think about, the sanctum, the crazy room to room, and trying to get to the merchant and the sacred water and all that stuff. And especially if the third one is Toda, Trial of the Ancestors, an auto battler. A lot of people were not into that. I was. That's another one that like I thought was
I
fresh
like.
and interesting.
I think Tote is amazing. It was one of my favorite leagues. But yeah,
I loved it.
you're right. Some people just did. That's why I stand by. I think the fourth one's going to be Izaro because that's like a nice like everyone will like that one. But anyway, we're off track. Um, I just like Izaro.
We'll get to there. We'll
Yeah.
get there.
The crazy thing is
Same here. Same here.
I used to hate Lab. Now I respect it. It PoE 2 made me like Lab and PoE 1 after like 11
Oh
years of
man.
hating it. Um, okay. So we've got the next question here is access and progression system. So comparing the campaign lock puzzle system or puzzle access in PoE 1 lab to PoE 2's entry token system, which did you feel was better? Is it PoE 1 where you get access to it at a certain level or the token system?
I'm gonna go with it. So I've got to throw back to previous conversations here and bring up the topic of the whole like, what do you want versus what do you think you want question, and how game developers have to kind of tread that fine line of like, they don't want to say like you players are stupid or whatever, but I think so. My instinct is like, it's cool that in PoE 2 it's as simple as getting the token and it's done. Like I don't have to do anything complicated for it, and like it's always so tedious and like, oh god, I've got to take time out of my campaign to go do these trials in PoE 1, and yet is even though it feels like, is it adding something that I'm not fully appreciating, that is adding to the atmosphere, and it's adding to the feel, and like, the buildup, where you don't feel like this thing is dropped on you out of nowhere. Like you've by the time you do your first lab, you've done 6 of these trials, and so you kinda have a feel for what the labyrinth is gonna be like. So even though my instinct is to say, like, the token system is nicer, it's easier, um, also, like, it adds a little something having to interact with it in little snippets throughout the way. What about you?
Yeah, I find this one an interesting topic. So for me, either system I'm impartial to because I know what Ascension is. Um, if I were a new player in Path of Exile 1 in particular, and this was when I first came in after the Ascension League, like it was like the next league or something like that, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And the problem with Ascension and PoE 1 is you have to know it exists to do it. And you eventually find out. But most of the time, you don't pay attention to what's happening in the campaign because you're like, I go here, 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 here. Like, I think I could play the whole campaign almost blindfolded. I'm not going to do that, by the way. But like, I believe I know exactly where I need to go because I've done it like a bajillion times now.
Twitch plays Jorgen campaign. Twitch will control you while you're
Yeah,
blindfolded.
exactly. Or just blindfold challenge. But that's the thing about PoE 1 where like it doesn't really give you an introduction to lab. And that's actually the issue with lab and a lot of the issues new players have with PoE 1. There's such like breadth of things you like even delve to get into delve the first time you have to go to I think it's like act 3 act 4 and then you've got to go and talk to the Nico at the very start of the mine sort of area that you go into for the campaign. A lot of players don't even know that, so like they don't know how to actually get into the mechanic. Even like Sanctum, like people wouldn't even know how to get into Sanctum. That's part of the issue that exists with Path of Exile 1 is the new player introduction and tutorial systems very reliant on the creator community and not on the game itself. Whereas PoE 2 does improve on that. And like to preface, I'm critical of lab or trials in PoE 2, but I think the introduction of how to access it and to progress it is easier and more sort of integrated into the campaign and part of the learning process of the game than what it was in Path of Exile 1. Path of Exile 1, it was like a bolt on. You're just like, bam, it's there. Like, go and do it. And that's
Do
the
you think
issue.
it's possible for a new player to miss the first time that you come across Balbala in Act 2? Do you think it's possible to just run past that?
I think it is like, and I've done it myself. So, like, arguably yes, but it's
That's why I
still,
asked.
but Act 3 with the Chaos Trial 100% it's relatively easy to find. Like actually, that's why I like Chaos Trial because it stands out more than the Trials of Sekima. But in Diablo 1, there's like this thing called Trials exists. Go do it whenever. YOLO. Like that's and the other thing like in PoE 1, you've got to like it gives you the prompt to do the trial in the area, but people will just like most of the time people just ignore that. So they'll be like, oh, I have to go back, and then you got to go all the way back through the campaign, redo all the areas, find all that. Like now that if you've played it 1,000 times like us, you know exactly where they are. But like I don't know. There's like Sekma, yeah, okay, you can miss that, but it's still sort of more pronounced than what lab trials were for a new player in PoE 1 because often they'll get to the end of the campaign and they'll be like, oh, I don't know like where the hell the lab is or what the trials are, and then they've got an unascended character with
Well,
like
what you said about, being reliant on the creator community, I felt that in my bones because, like, every time that I've done a beginner-friendly anything, any kind of build guide that's like, "Here's how to go through the campaign if it's your first time," you have to focus on that so much because it's so easy for a new player to miss, and it's so strong. Like, you can't be missing that as a new player, that's a big chunk of your build, so, yeah, I feel that. Kind of like, as a creator, if you're trying to help a new player, make su make sure they know, those trials are important.
yeah, exactly. Um, so I think we're on to the next one, which is challenge level and scaling. So I think we've
Yeah.
touched on this a fair bit, but this is a really interesting. We're starting to get into the more diverse of questions here as we go through this. I feel because yeah, this is the more controversial stuff. So, how does the difficulty in trials in PoE 2 compare to Lab and PoE 1? Does it match your progression? Do you think, or is it off? What's your view on that?
No. No, it does not. Not quite. Um, Now, PoE 1, like we discussed a little earlier, it had the reverse problem once upon a time, where by the time you got to your Uber lab, you were like, as long as you were running a reasonable build, you were probably gonna be way over leveled for Uber Lab when you had to get your all 6 trials by RNG or whatever. Nowadays, PoE 1, I'd say, is pretty well on point, and maybe that's my bias, like, knowing how to run it and knowing Izaro's moves and how to get out of the stuff, but, like, I feel comfortable running my labs at end of Act 3, beginning of Act 4, end of Act 7, beginning of Act 8, Act 10 right before I face Katava, and then, sometime, like you said, late white, early yellow maps, uh, finish it off whenever, it depends on how much my build relies on that 4th Ascendancy. But then in PoE 2, I have just gotten in the habit of deliberately putting off the trial for an extra few levels just because, like, I don't know, it's just not worth the hassle, even if it is a big upgrade for my build. If you if you fail, it's just so much time down the drain. So I'm like, you know what? I'll at least get to the end of Act 2 before I even think about Sekima. This is a numbers game. I think this is tweakable. I think that you alluded to this earlier. The 4th floor of Sekima Sanctum is still not great, especially that 4th boss. Um, yeah, you've gotta be on your game to beat that, and it just feels so bad because how long will you have spent in that trial? And then to just die to one of his crazy clock moves at the end is ugh. Yes, you can buy the Bereas on trade and, the ones that have been already advanced to the 4th floor, but then you're spending money and I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's part of a bigger problem with the way that PoE 2's campaign's designed. So, some people are like, I like the challenge of the campaign. You have not run 15 characters in one patch, right? So that if you've played it the first time and the challenge is great, fantastic. I've played 6 characters through to level 80 plus to 90 at this stage in this patch for point 2. I can tell you now by the third character, or even by the at this stage by the first character, you just don't care. At this point, you just want to progress. Like you want to get to end game. That's half the fun is the build. The fun isn't the campaign anymore after the first run. That's actually part of the problem with how Path of Exile 2's scaling works. So in Path of Exile 1, you've got a 10 act system and the progression level is relatively eased through. And because of that, lab is spread out and scaled at a very equitable level as you level up to whatever your level is, level 75 by the time you get to 72 or 75 by the time you get to Uber Lab, right? Or I think it's 68 even. You can do it. Yeah, you can do it pretty low. Even before that, then. But the problem with Path of Exile 2 is we look at the scaling between the acts. And I think we discussed this in the last episode as well around how the campaign scales difficulty versus, where you're at in the campaign. And that's currently the problem with Lab. And so this is where I come back to like if they're putting 4 labs in, it's very likely going to be like those increments are in each lab. And realistically, the sell to us as the player was that you could play any of the labs and progress. While that is not an untrue statement, it's also not entirely explicitly correct either. Like, the fact that you get access to Sekma at 21, you get access to Chaos at about 32 to 33. You'll probably get access to the next trial at 40 something, probably 45 to 48. And then the next trial goes, past the campaign, which is, going to be, whatever that, level 75 usually is when you get the next trial point, give or take. Um, the level scaling in the way that lab or trials work just feels off. Like in PoE 1, you could have your first 3 labs done basically by the end of the campaign within reason. And then you would have to work for your last Uber Lab to get those last points. But with 3 sets of trial points in or ascension points, your build was like on its way to where it needs to be. In PoE 2, if you're farming T15s with two trial ascendancy points, like that's game changing levels of stats at that point.
And
Like,
I have, for the record, I have done that.
yeah, exactly. And many players have as well because they get jarred by the third set of ascension points if they either are not skilled enough at the mechanic and or they're not statted up enough. And it's a combination of the two to an element of it. Chaos Trial is simply you have to do enough damage to take down Trial Master as your fourth ascendancy point. If you don't, you will get ripped. Like, and you work all the way through all 10 levels, which takes X amount of time to just get one tapped by the trial master. That's not fun for anybody. And that's the other issue is the length of how long the trials take to complete and the tedium of the trials as well. Whereas in lab, you just literally run 3 Izaros, go through the gauntlets, you're at the boss, you fight the boss. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose if your character's under geared, and then you come back, you do it again. But it's a relative, like looking at it now, hindsight's 2020. I used to think it was a really painful process, but now looking at where it is with trials, I look at lab as an enjoyable process because it is significantly less painful than what trials are to progress. And like, I don't go back and farm trials after that point. I've completed the trials. That's it. I'm done. Like chaos trials, maybe sometimes, but I just don't find the mechanic all that enjoyable. It's just like, because of the RNG, the potential for failure, the potential to get one hit by random mechanics every 5 seconds, it's just not that fun to farm unless you're really going after the currency that'll come from it at the end of the day. But yeah, that's my take on it. It's I just feel like the scaling is off, and maybe that's because the game's not complete. Probably mostly because the game's not complete, and we may see some changes to that.
I think we're on the same page there.
Mm.
Move on to number 6.
Yep. Subclass selection through gameplay. Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, so this is like a broad question about just the whole idea of earning your subclass this way. Like compared to other ARPGs, other RPGs generally, you know, games that even have subclasses to begin with and how you earn them. Like look at Destiny or whatever. Um, so I'll take it just real quick to start and just say I like it. It's unique. I've never really, even though I'm the one who wrote this question, I've never really had cause to stop and think about this before. It's just always been part of the game to me. Uh, but now that I do stop to think about it, I like the idea that you feel invested in this. You don't just click a box. You don't just level up and only get points from your skill tree. This is like another axis of power that you feel like you have some control over. And generally speaking, not too much to say. I like it. Other games get on well without it, but yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. I never thought about this too much, but like I think back to like Titan Quest, you get it at a certain level, because that's got dual class system. Um, you think to Last Epoch, where you get it at a certain level. I think it's level 10, you get your first class, and I
Yeah,
can't remember the second.
right.
Haven't played it enough to remember
It's
everything.
it's built in though, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah, you just natively get it and you allocate points across it. Um, like that's okay. It's not memorable. Like, and that's I do like the lab system. I think if you didn't have the lab system, it wouldn't make PoE as unique as what it is. And there is weight behind the choice because you've just spent like 20 minutes or 15 minutes going through a mechanic to get that
a good point.
ascendancy. And like if you don't like gear check into that, you're not going to get it. And that ascendancy holds a lot of power and benefit for you. So you have incentive to do it. I do like the lab system on that basis. I didn't like when they had locked the classes, until the recent patch. Now you can respec the classes. That was a horrific decision. And the reasoning behind, and I won't be nice about it, right? I'll be civil, but I won't be nice about it. The reasoning behind why just was not sufficiently appropriate. Like it wasn't client. It wasn't client centric or player centric. It was just because I don't want the game to be like that. And that I watched the interview, and that was one that stuck out to me as like, but why? Because it's always been available in the past, and what do you lose from this? The player has everything to lose, not the devs. But that would be my take on that in particular. I know that's I think everyone, most people listening to this will be like 100%. Like, I don't think there'll be anyone that'll be like, it should be class locked unless you're the devs. And I'm not baking on the devs here,
And
but
they introduced a reasonable compromise. It's more difficult to respec classes than it was in PoE1. You
mhm,
have to, however many ascendancy points you already have, you need to complete a trial of that level of difficulty to whereas in PoE1, you could just go back to normal lab level, area level 33 or whatever, and trounce it. Um, thank goodness, and I know this is a low bar. I just want to say thank goodness they were smart enough to include the ability to unspec your lab points or your ascendancy points with Balbola rather than having to do the whole thing with no ascendancy because you have to respec in town or unspec in town. Yeah, that's I'll give them a minor win on that one.
yeah,
Anyways,
that's it. I thought that was worth discussing because yeah, I watched the interview and I just could not understand for the life of me why you would anchor like that. And this sort of like, we all rip on the vision. Um, and this is probably an episode for a future point in time, but yeah, we're going to have a chat about the vision at a point in time because I think
the
that's
vision. Oh,
oh,
baby.
that's gonna be a loaded episode, mate. Um, because I
Oh,
don't,
yeah.
yeah, we'll try and look at it positively to a degree, but this, for anyone who doesn't know, the PoE community has been strongly opposed to the vision for the best part of what, like 7 or 8 years, something like that. The vision keeps coming
As
up.
long as I've been playing.
Exactly. Calandra was the last time the vision came up, and yeah, the player base was not happy. That was the worst league ever. Actually, I had a good league that league. I was playing
We're
tanks. That's when Archdem was
I did
introduced.
okay that week.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people
We're
did.
we're in danger of rabbit holing here, but, like, yeah, there's a lot we could say on this
Yeah.
topic.
So if you want to see the vision being spoken about in the next episode, put it in the comments below and like the video. Um,
Oh, man.
yeah, you're like, oh, let's get off this topic. We could go down the rabbit hole big time. All
We
right.
could.
So are we at subclass selection through gameplay? I think we are.
7 because we talked
Ah,
subclass, yeah.
yeah, reward structures. I'm involved in this conversation now, so I'm forgetting what question. All right.
I
So
know, gotta refocus.
yeah. So are PoE2 trials viable for endgame farming? And how do rewards compare to PoE1's enchantments? And to preface, I think enchantments will later change to gem alter, or like was it the trans gem system? But for anyone who played Path of Exile or hasn't played Path of Exile in the earlier days, we used to have a boot, glove, and helm enchantment. And I do miss Fury. I wish they would bring Fury back into the game. Fury enchantments were sick, but I li-
That's the one you missed. That's
I
interesting. I
really
would
liked
not
it.
have picked that out of the lineup.
Yeah, I really liked it. Wasn't that
I had
Tempest?
no time for the glove enchantments. I
Really?
never bothered with enchantments, yeah.
You never put Commandment of Fury on a build?
I don't think I did.
You know, you could
I feel like I'm missing out.
proc curses with Commandment of Fury. So if you had a corrupted curse implicit on your gloves, you could then use Commandment of Fury to
Mm.
proc Commandment of Fury, and that would proc the curse.
Hmm.
There you go. So
Alright,
what's
let's
your
see.
what's your
So
take
how do we
on
feel?
well, you could go first here. What's your
How
take
was
on?
it? Yeah, so I have not done extensive endgame farming of the trials, but I know people have. So I'll give a shout to a channel, a little bit of a clickbaity title, but good channel. Grinding Currency in PoE1 or in PoE2, I think is the full name of the channel. I call him Grinding Currency for short. He's got a ton of stuff on farming Sekima in particular. Just that's what he does. He goes through and he makes a good amount of currency that way. Funds his whole builds, and it looks interesting. Haven't haven't done it myself because I spent most of last league or patch or whatever you want to call it, just trying to push as far into the maps as I could and kind of get a feel for that. But I could see this as like a secondary thing that I might fall back on again because I kind of like the Sekima system. So I think it's viable, and they've even improved just or either improved or about to improve next week. I forget which it is. The chest the odds of getting good chests in Sekima and of those chests dropping rarer currencies. So like I do think it's viable. I don't I haven't seen the math of how it stacks up div per hour or whatever against Citadel hunting or anything else. But like you could do it. Like you're not going to lose money doing it.
Yeah,
What about you? What do you think?
yeah. I think they did the patch for Chaos Trials where like the items that were dropping were not very good, and part of that is because of the bit of a cracked crafting system that currently exists in PoE 2.
Yeah.
And so that like to scale a weapon, you need to scale a build, you need a weapon of crazy levels of DPS, and that just wasn't dropping in the Trials of Chaos. And the corruptions either. And maybe they can now, but they basically went to currency stacks for later or levels of the trial. Um, I think there is a place for it. I think right now it's very early. Like obviously a lot of it was like the special and unique runes that drop in the Trial of Chaos, which are really where the value is. But a lot of them don't sell for a lot of currency. Like you might walk out of a trial with like 20x tops. I haven't really played around with it this time around. Like I was farming it last in the point one patch with my dual mace strike character, my witch hunter. But I might go back to it and
Was that the
try.
one you called the windmill?
Yeah, the windmill build. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't good at taking trial master down, but it was fun. Like it was early days of the game. Now I have a crossbow build that blows the whole screen up in 2 seconds with trample toes, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't know what I was doing last patch. I'm really starting to master this game. Um, Now like one taps a boss in Trials of Chaos at level 80, but yeah, like I think it's a good system to farm within. I think the problems exist with the negative mods that you get from Ultimatum. They're just way too perverse. Like they really hurt when they're bad. And if that was downtoned a bit to make it more, you know, tenable, like it's already hard enough. Like you can get one tap by a mob. You don't need to be stacking ridiculous mod after ridiculous mod onto the game. Funnily enough, though, Chaos Trials were actually easier than running the Endgame when the point 2 patch first came out. So, like, because everything was so bad and overtuned that basically the Trials of Chaos they didn't really touch anything in, and it was actually much more lucrative to farm the Trials of
Huh.
Chaos than it was to farm maps. I don't know if anyone knew that. Because I picked up on that. I was
I
like,
did not.
yeah, I should just farm Chaos Trials because it was more fun than running a map. But yeah, I guess that's where they see it. I don't know where they go with Tota if they add Tota in, and I don't know where they go into the future with the fourth one. Um, what like I suspect there'll be more
Temple.
crafting currencies. Well, yeah, I reckon tattoos might come back into the game as well. But like, could they even come into the game if with actual like we're probably going into the question that we've got. Have we got that
Let's
question?
before we get to that, let's talk real quick. PoE 1 comparison, right? I think we kind of skipped over that a little bit, but just to compare to the rewarding nature of PoE 1, you know how you've said before, lightning arrow players are kind of like a different breed of player. I feel the same way about like dedicated PoE 1 lab runners. There's something not quite right there.
They're just
I
they're
love you guys. I love you to death, but there's something not quite right there about the zooming through lab at warp factor 9,
Queen of the Forest
just for
builds.
hours and hours and hours,
Just
you
like
know?
bub, bub, bub,
So
bub, 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 bub,
just
bub. And for anyone who hasn't watched a lab runner in Path of Exile 1, YouTube that.
try it.
It is the most degenerate
Yep.
playstyle I've ever seen in my life. Like it is
There's
horrific.
something not right there. And they've got it all down to a millisecond science where while Izaro is spawning in, they're swapping off their speed gear to put on their damage dealing gear. And then while he's dying, they put on their speed gear again. Like it's wild. This was, I don't know how popular it is in the current state of the game with the transfigured gem system. So for those who don't know, as Jorgen mentioned earlier, there's a change, right? So nowadays, you get this font or whatever that you interact with that can give you gem experience, transfigured gems, gem quality, all this stuff, change gems into currency. What it used to be was the one and only source of getting these enchantment modifiers that you could have one of on boots, belt, gloves, and helmet. And the big popular ones were the helmet ones. I hear Jorgen saying that he was a big fan of some of the glove ones, but the ones that I think everybody knew about were these helmet chants. They did stuff like specific auras would have better reservation efficiency, uh, forbidden right fires more projectile, stuff like that. And there was this whole cottage industry of like you would give your item to a player who is maintaining an Excel sheet of like 50 items. He's got them all in his stash that players have given him, trusted him with, vouch systems to make sure that they're not trying to rip you off. And you would tell him, you would put an order in with, I want this enchantment on my helmet. And they would just run lab over and over until they got an enchantment that somebody wanted. It was a choice of, you got three options out of dozens, right? Maybe even hundreds of possible options. And they would just go down in order on their Excel sheet. And whenever they found the next one up, give it to that person. And those could go for dozens of divines for the really popular ones, because you'd have a line 7 people deep wanting the same enchantment, and this guy's holding helmets. And like, that was a little degenerate. Like, I don't know if that's exactly the kind of gameplay that they want to encourage, but it was funny. I don't know.
I liked it. I actually thought it was one of the, like, number one, I benefited when they put in the like level 84, 85 trials or labs, because you would do like you would put the Atlas point in for the elevated offerings, and you could sell them for like
Yep,
1 or 2 div a piece. They were profitable as hell. Like
I
they
did
were
that.
great. Yeah, that's
Yep.
it was a farming strategy for a while. Um, but like I sort of liked it, and the reasons why I like it is probably the reasons why the player base in PoE 2 sort of dipped real harshly and didn't take the patch very well this time around. In PoE 1, one of the things that really made PoE 1 and really brought the community together was because there was such a community focus about some of these exercises. Like, you had to have this crazy dude that was running 10,000 labs a day and being funded by a cabal of community members, because otherwise the gear didn't
You just
exist.
accepted it.
Exactly. You were like, it's like there is a job in every type of field and industry. And that was the case with PoE 1. Some people
He
like
was the
lab.
crazy warlock at the edge of town who's doing the magic. Crazy guy over there.
He's like the
Anyways.
wanderer that goes out to do like his hunting trips and brings back all the stuff for the community, right? It's the same with like delvers. Like us delvers will go down, we'll farm all's uprisings for everyone and resonators and everything. Every mechanic is so unique that it has a player base that follows it. Right now, that's actually one of the issues with Path of Exile 2, I feel, is it's lost that unique sort of, like, the mechanics are just like melded into everything. And the problem with it is that it doesn't make the mechanics stand out as something unique that a player can, like, I'm going to master this, like really specialize in this one area and become the best in it. And that's one of the things that makes Path of Exile 1 so loved by so many players is, yeah, okay, the game is getting on in the years, but it makes you feel like if you're investing in that mechanic and you're mastering it, it's like, and there was so many mechanics. And part of this is because, obviously PoE 2 is very new and it's incomplete, so we haven't seen a real league. Like, people are calling the .2 patch a league. It's not, it's a patch, and
No.
it's not a real league. It's just sort of being perceived as that, and the devs haven't assisted in being able to really clearly identify that. But that's the thing that makes PoE 1 very unique, and Lab and unto itself really unique. And it's why the labs in PoE 2, like, there's drops from labs in PoE 2, but they feel very generic and they don't stand out. Whereas in PoE 1, you had like Hellman chants were a whole market. Like, even the jewels, the ones that drop, and it's like, you get +1 minimum endurance charge, and you have a cap of 3, and
Oh yeah. God, what are they called? Why
I
am I
can't,
blanking on this?
I can't
Uh,
remember their names now. We haven't played Path of Exile 1 for a
I'm
little.
seeing them in my mind.
Yeah, so you gotta farm Ganix to get them to drop. And so people specifically go and they juice up lab to be able to farm Ganix because you've got to get, do a number of elements of the lab to be able to get to Ganix. I think it's Ganix or something like that. And basically, yeah, they'll go and they'll farm those jewels, for example. And they're worth a lot of currency. Emperor's jewels. That's the other one that exists. So Emperor's Might, it makes your character size larger and stuff like that. Those are some of the things that exist in Path of Exile 1 in the labs that just make them unique and really rare. And because it's not the most farm mechanic in the game, when you do have one of those drops, they're worth a lot. And that's
Grand Spectrum, by the way.
Grand Spectrums. Yep. Now it's yeah. Um, yeah, I guess that's the issue that I see with PoE 2 right now. And maybe it's because the game's incomplete, it just doesn't have that feel. But it just feels very generic, if that makes sense. It's
It does.
cheapened.
Yeah. It's been compressed. There's no, yeah, you don't branch out. It's just like you said. There's nobody. You don't have the weird lab warlock over here who's just doing that, and everybody kind of relies on him to go do his thing. You don't have the person who's like, I'm just gonna do, I don't know, delve all day, just as a random, for example. You don't have somebody who's doing logbooks or anything.
Blight.
Blight. We talked last time about how people like just go farm blight for hours. So
I
yeah,
th- I,
it
I
would be great to see.
I think we've just reached into our next question actually, without
Yeah,
even thinking about it. Yeah,
please.
yeah. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one, and like the things that we found once upon a time that were annoying in Path of Exile 1, we now look at and we're like, actually,
Yeah,
they're the things that really made it special. And
yeah.
maybe it's nostalgia.
That's why I try not to be too. I try not to judge too harshly because you never know what things you're gonna look back on in a year and be like, "Oh, that was actually kind of nice." Like I know it was frustrating, but like it added to the feel or the atmosphere or whatever. I try to reserve a little judgment. But let's move on. Let's we and like you said, we already kind of started talking trial identity versus lab identity. How distinct do trials feel as game mechanics compared to the lab? Do they have that unique identity, or is there something missing? What do you
Yes.
think?
So like I remember like things that Izaro says in the lab system. And like every time I fight Izaro, I get excited to fight Izaro. Doesn't even matter if it's a
But
high
is
level.
that because you fought him 1,000 times and you've only fought the trial master like 20 times or whatever? Like, how much of that is learned over 10 years?
I'm not sure. It's a hard one to stack up on. Like um I don't know. I feel like all the elements of lab just feels because lab is so unique as well. Like the trials feel very like they don't feel that unique. They feel like okay, you're gonna do the mechanic, you're gonna do the boss, and it's like, oh, this is just another means to an end. Lab is a means to an end, but like Izaro as a character, it's like Crystal King for me. Izaro as a character is a
I
satisfying
caught that.
boss.
You talk about him the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Is a satisfying boss to absolutely smash, and like, and the reward you get at the end, you're like endorphin. It's like an endorphin kick when you kill him. And
Yeah.
I don't get that feeling with because the tedium that exists with the chaos and the Sekhmet trials, it outweighs like the enjoyment that one might get, and some people might enjoy it. Probably a number of people enjoy it. Um, but like I always found, like the reward on lab really isn't that good if you're just playing it for the ascendancies. But at least like it's a somewhat enjoyable process to get through. Now that I look at it, many years of playing it, and then realizing actually it's not that bad. I remember I think I did a video at one point saying anything they do in PoE 2 will be better than the lab in PoE 1. And I'm happy to admit that I will eat my words and admit I was full of crap. Um, because
Yeah.
apparently you could make a worse mechanic than lab. What's your
Oh,
take on it
man.
anyway? Yeah.
I'll push back a little bit and I'll say that I think Sekima at least has a unique feel to it, though to your point, maybe it's the unique feel that not everybody likes.
Mm.
I mean, we talked earlier about how maybe it's even too niche, too, you know, unique, and not something that every build could or would or should do. Um, so there's that. But what I think the identity that it lacks is something we talked about earlier too. Is there's no build up to it. There's no like you run across these plaques if you're a new player and you're still reading things in the environment. Obviously, we're not we're reading things in the environment at thousands of hours later. But you come across these things like, "Oh, what is this? What is this trial thing?" And then you do these little puzzles, and it kind of it builds this atmosphere that there's nothing really like that in Path of Exile 2. Like you come across Balbala and she's like, "Great, good to meet you. Meet me over at the Trial of the Sycamas, and you can have this thing." Um, so that I think could have some improvement, just some kind of hint that it's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
But
That's actually one of the Steam achievements in Path of Exile one, and like I think one of the global achievements is going and reading all of the like the
oh my
sub.
god,
That's the crazy thing about Path of Exile 1. The lore that's built into the environment and the plaques and everything is like there's a little bit of that in Path of Exile 2, but I feel like there was so much more effort put into Path of Exile 1 around trying to build the world. Like I look at, and this is going a bit off topic, but it sort of comes back to the identity of it, big picture, is like I know maybe I don't know if this is because I played Path of Exile for so long, but you sort of know so much about it without even thinking about Path of Exile. You're like, oh, Rayclast, and yeah, you start thinking about and all the elements that make it unique, and sin and innocence and everything. But then, like with Path of Exile 2, I find like it's sort of like overcorrecting to give it an identity, but then or trying to give the campaign identity, and then it's like, but you've overcorrected too much, and you've just like bashed too much into us, and it's lost meaning. That's like, you get to the temple at the end of Act 3. That's the Sun Temple. I don't even know what the significance of this is because I'm not paying attention to it.
I mean, the identity of the early structure of the game, like, I'm sorry, but this is just Diablo 2 and 3 smashed together. Like, oh, look, it's the first act, and we're on the rainy, wooded moor, and there's a mysterious hooded figure. And then we go to the second act, and we're in the desert. Shocker. It's got identity. It's just a
Act
little bit somebody else's
Act
identity.
Act 3, Kurast. It's
Yeah, yeah.
Kurast. It's
It's
literally
Garage.
Kurast. It's the ziggurat. Like it's literally like, and that's the thing about PoE 1. It doesn't really follow anything. Like you wash up on a beach, same thing in PoE 2, but you wash up on a beach and you end up going through this totally random environment with dungeons and stuff like that. Um, and you just you remember it. It's just like it's unique unto itself. But yeah, and I think like we're a little off topic, but I think we're talking about identity here. Um, the problem with PoE 2 is it's trying to be a spiritual successor to Diablo 2. It doesn't need to do that. It just needs to be PoE 2. Well, like PoE 1 is its own game. It's its own thing. It's its own beast. It's got its own lore. Doesn't need to build on another game's lore and mimic it for nostalgia. It just needs to do its own thing. And that's some of the identity. And maybe it's an episode for a later down the track. Actually, I think it's a really good topic to talk about later down the track, to be honest with you, around the similarities of PoE 2 to D2 versus PoE 1 being just its own thing. And that's probably the thing that makes PoE 1 stand out, is it is literally its own thing. I can't think of anything that is like PoE 1. But PoE 2, you can compare it in a straight parallel to D2, even in the gear. But that's yeah, I guess that's my take on it.
I think that'll round us off on number 8. You want to take us to number 9?
Yeah, so speculations and features wish list we've got here. So what changes or improvements would you want to see to the trial system? So should Izaro return? And what could the final two trials look like? So we touched on this throughout this conversation, but what are your takes on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just really briefly. I mean, the changes, improvements, just some tuning. I think, like, let's down tune the afflictions in Sekima, down tune the downsides in Chaos. We don't. There's not too much to talk about there. Like that to me is more of a numbers thing. Now the question of should Izaro return? That's more interesting to me. Um, and I would refer to like the rest of PoE2 as a whole, where I keep expecting to see this kind of thing and not. So, like, I think the only thing I can think of off the top of my head other than the Beast, which is a central feature of both plot lines, only thing we've seen so far to make me go like, "Ah, yeah, you." We've got Alva is in both, and then, like, I think this is my tinfoil hat conspiracy. I think that Krobel in Act 1 is supposed to be a mutated and busted up Einhar. Like, if you look at him, I think he's Einhar if you check the mask.
Yeah.
But anyways, I keep expecting to see more of that and haven't. And I think it would be a very hype moment to see one of those big NPCs or bosses from PoE1. I think a lot of PoE1 players would see a trailer for that and be like, "Oh yeah, this like whoever it is, just like something to bring you back in time." And if it's Izaro, awesome. That'd be great.
I,
Um,
I would
and then look
give.
at the final two trial. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I would give to see Izaro in it, like as the final trial. Like thinking from a product standpoint, if they were like, "Oh, we're going to announce the final trial, you have a lead up to it," and they're like, "Don't give you much information to the lead up," and then just like a trailer, no words, no nothing,
You
and
hear his voice.
exactly, it's like where there is a gold key, there is a gold door,
Yeah.
and then you see him like bash
The
through.
crowd goes wild.
That to me, I would be like, I am so G'd up for this. I don't even think anybody knows how G'd up I would be. It's like we're gonna go again, Azaro. We're gonna go again, and it's like basically Lab, but like a new version of the original Eternal Lab, and it's been afflicted by the corruption and like that to me.
Sure.
Like if they were gonna do nostalgia bait on PoE1 and continuity, that would be it for me. I'd be like, okay, I will only ever do that lab.
Orman Janowski, bring back the trial soundtrack or the Labyrinth soundtrack. Oh my god, the
I
nostalgia.
I've got the book for when the game first came. They did it at ExileCon 2 years ago. I've got that trap, the lab book. Like it's just like
Awesome.
yeah, everything about lab is like to redo it and have like and even add the helmet enchant system in again. Add the
Oh my
commandment
god.
system. Like just go. We're bringing it back, but in Path of Exile 2, and you know you can get helmet chance to beef your character, and it would be a great outcome. And we have that dance again where we have degenerates that are just going after Hellman Chance, building Uberlab farmers. Like you imagine that. It'd be amazing. Like it would make lab, it would make trials, like you call it trial, like the trial of something. I don't know. I don't know what you call it, or the trials of eternal labyrinthian or
Of
something.
eternity.
Trials of
Trial of
eternity.
a
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, however they want to coin it. Like it to me, and it'd be like a revamped, and you pivot it like from a different angle for the current like Lab and PoE1. You repivot it in a different pivot, and like it's like a return back to, and it's like further degraded and falling apart and more chaotic. To me, that feels like I don't know, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I said this before. I had not heard until this conversation that there might be a fourth. I knew that there was going to be a third, but if there was a fourth, that seems like the perfect capstone to me.
Yeah,
That's like I think we talked about, yeah, like Toda, Trial of the Ancestors, like an auto battler style thing, might be the third. I'll be excited for that. That'll be interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, I think thematically, if they wanted a big player base win with the old PoE1 guys, like yeah, bring back Izaro to be the final boss of Ascendancy. Like it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Anyways,
It just feels
that
right. Yeah. All right. Last question. You can ask this one.
all right. So this one we've touched on again too. It's about RNG
Yeah.
and system legacy. So is RNG a good idea in trial mechanics? And then separate but related, should PoE2 have reused more lab elements, or was it right to start fresh? So RNG, like I alluded to before, Um, I don't have a problem with RNG in terms of so like lab's a good example. Lab has RNG in the sense that the area resets every day, and the PoE lab guy is constantly running it and keeping the community informed, or he was for a long time. And that's the type of RNG. It is neither positive nor negative. It's just neutral. It's just to keep it from getting stale. The same layout every time. And sure, like once you've done it enough, you start recognizing patterns and like certain room puzzles and stuff. You're like, oh, there's a block of several things that they kind of chunk together. You start recognizing, but like it shakes it up. That's a kind of benign RNG. It's neither good nor bad. RNG in PoE2 has both good and bad. Like it gives you positives and gives you negatives. I suppose with chaos, it's only negatives. And yeah, they've got to tone down some of those. Nothing new here that we haven't talked about. Just like it feels bad that the RNG that is gating your ascendancy is not just like how much easier are we going to make it for you. It's not only how much harder are we going to make it, but might we just go ahead and this time make it impossible? We're going to force you into a situation where you have to do a no-hit Sekima run, which like, come on. No, only the degenerates are doing the no-hit runs. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you nail it on the head with that. So this is content gating. So the random system in PoE 1 is like you said, a benign system. It has no real impact on the outcome of your character. Like sometimes you'll rip on a lab gauntlet, right? That happens. And you're just like, okay, all right, I messed up, I goofed. That's on me. That's not because of lab. That's on me. That's player driven. That's player driven failure. Like you learn from that and you get better at it, or your character needs more regeneration or more defensive layers, or you don't have enough damage to take down Izaro, and or you get hit by everything. And even to this day, sometimes my character's a little on the edge and I don't have leveling gear. I'm like, all right, this is challenging. Like I'm gonna get ripped. I may lose, but I'm willing to give it a crack. Um, in PoE 2, putting in a system that puts in RNG based negative, like debuffs to you to make it deliberately harder, just feels like, and then making that part of the progression system. There's no need to do that. Like it's actually already hard enough without honor. It's already hard enough without the
Plenty.
yeah, exactly. Like there's enough things you have to dodge. There's enough ground dot. There's enough big one hits. Armor doesn't work currently, right? His armor is weak as hell. A lot of the skills don't scale properly. Aside from lightning spear right now. Is it 53% of the player base or something like that's playing lightning spear? Don't quote me exactly on it, but it's some stat that's wild like that. Um,
It's high. Yeah, it's
yeah,
high, whatever it is.
it's a large portion, and like so you've got enough things working against you just like natively within the game and how it's set up, and then you go and tack on more difficulty, and then the thing that I don't like at the end of lab is it's almost like a pinnacle boss fight to get your last
It
ascendancy.
is.
It shouldn't be like
It
that.
is.
It should be a bot. It should be a solidly difficult, like not difficult, but a challenging boss, but not so challenging that you get one hit. Like, for example, Chaos Trials. You get hit by the slam, most builds, that's a one hit death. Um, the other thing is like when he goes into like his like specter mode and time mode, where basically like he shows like basically all you do is you just smack spacebar and dodge absolutely everything, get to the edge of the screen, and like if you're a range character, you're gonna have a great time. If you're a melee character and your damage isn't high enough, you're gonna have a bad time. Like you better have a lot of defense. Um,
And Zarok, he's got like Maven style, Eater of Worlds style, Pinnacle Boss. Like you're running around getting slowed down, trying to get to each of the bubbles or whatever before they like that's Pinnacle Boss style mechanics, and that's just to get your ascendancy.
it doesn't fit where that is a progression system. It makes no sense that you would put that in the game like that. And like, are they going to change that anytime soon? Probably not. If they put in the last two sets of trials and they are significantly better designed in that respect, people will never come back to those first two trials because they're just going to go, bugger it, we'll do them to get the first like 4 points. and then basically from there they're just going to go, no, we're not going to muck around with that because it's not worth the effort. Like if they put lab in, I'll do the trials in sequence of the level, but I will never play the first three trials. I will always just do lab if I'm going to farm something. Like that's where my headspace sits. Like and that I would say there's a lot of players out there that would be exactly like that. I don't like things where it's time trialed. I play Path of Exile for a reason because I can
Yeah,
grind for hours on end. I don't like non no hit runs. Like I just find that like I'm a tank player. And then also I
yeah.
don't like it where I've got to like have a timed mechanic to get my skill point. I just want to beat the boss, get my point, and then I'll farm it and I'll learn the mechanic at a higher level. Um, because I've already got my power. But I don't know, maybe that's a privileged take on it. Um, and maybe I'm just being a bit of a baby about it, but like I don't know. Someone
It's
someone will
what
say
what
it.
it what it would be if we wanted to put it into words, and not like calling you a baby, but like the design philosophy that lines up with the way it is right now is, ascendancy is a privilege, not a right. They're
Yeah,
they're saying, it's something, it's a bonus, it's something that you can get if you're strong enough, but unlike what we got used to in PoE 1 where it was, like, default, like, if you were grinding that first weekend, you were gonna have your Uber lab, if not by the end of the weekend, but, like, shortly thereafter, and it was just, like, part of your build. But if they intend, and I hope they don't, but if they intend this to be, fourth ascendancy is a privilege, not a right, then they've really got to stop having all the good ascendancy options gated two at a time, where you've got to go too deep on all the ascendancy trees to get to the good stuff. Because then you get your first two, and so you've got one of the two deep options, and then you only get like the introductory for the second option. So,
yeah.
yeah, I don't want them to treat lab as a, but that would be the ethos if they were to say, hey, maybe not everybody's gonna get their fourth lab. So,
I hope.
oh, but then, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
yeah,
no, I was going to say I hope they don't go in that route because like they're going in the direction of wanting to make the game more new player friendly. That is the total opposite of being a new player friendly
yeah,
game. New player friendly doesn't mean like load it into the campaign, beat the campaign, call it a day, right? New player friendly
hmm,
means that a player with very low experience can go from 0 to level 100 and do all the content as easily, maybe not as easily as an experienced player, but they should have a relatively smooth progression through to enjoy the game at the very end game. Not cap out at T5 maps. That is not appropriate. You should be, the progression should be we're going to assist the player to get to T15 maps. And then going beyond that to pinnacles is where the real skill checks come in and learning the boss mechanics and all the rest of it. But like the progression journey should be like that. Right now, with a lot of the players in the comments I've seen on videos and everything else, are new players and like the game is just grueling to get through. Um, and it's actually a deterrent for newer players coming to the game, despite a lot of players are playing it because of the hype and it's new. um, over time, that luster is going to wear off, and then you're going to want to attract more new players, and without people coming back, and you're just going to totally pigeonhole the game.
plenty of people put the game down and didn't make a big spectacle of it. They didn't make a big forum post about why they were putting the game down. They didn't, write a manifesto to GGG. They were just, like, yeah, maybe it's not for me. What was launch week? Like they sold 2 million keys or whatever, and like, don't get me wrong, 400,000 or 500,000 concurrent players is very impressive for Path of Exile, but keep in mind that's a quarter of the people who theoretically had keys to play. And so, I mean, like, a lot of people put down the game for reasons that we're just not going to know about. I wonder if their metrics can show them, how many people died to that first labyrinth or that first second one. And they were like, nope, that's it for me. I'm done. But the last part of this question is, should PoE2 have reused more lab elements from PoE 1, or was it right to start fresh? For this one, I like that we get to end on an easy note here, because for me, the answer to this is like, I could have gone either way. If they had made it more thematically similar to the lab, I would have been happy with that. And if they wanted to make something new and fresh, I would have been happy with that. Like, obviously, we've talked about ways that they could improve what they've got, but I don't have a firm, opinionated answer on this one. Like, I think I would have been happy however they did it, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like there are two trains of thought about this, which is, you're copying Path of Exile 1, we don't want Path of Exile 1, or it should be more like Path of Exile 1. I'm the same. I sort of think like if they redid elements out of PoE 1, they have to be done in a new way, and that's unique to PoE 2. Like if we want PoE 2 to be its own thing, because obviously it's not part of PoE 1 like originally planned, um, they sort of need to take the elements, but like they've got to look at how they modernize the elements if they're going to do that, and not just like slap on a new model with some new rigging and call it a day, but like can you change the interaction and make it a totally like make it nostalgic to a degree to the way that it looks, but also make it different so it interacts totally differently. And they sort of tried that with the Trials of the Sekma and Chaos, but I don't think it hits the way that they intended, and that will likely change over time because it's early access. And there's another number of things that happen like that, like charms, for example, are a great example of that being like a substitution for auto flasking. But then some people didn't use auto flasking, so there was really good design mechanics that were not based on auto flasking. Um, I think time will tell as to what the last two look like, as to whether or not they take that pitch. But I'm sort of the same. Like I could go either way, just as long as it makes sense to what they're doing, and it's not just like rehashing the wheel or a lazy approach or whatnot. Um, yeah, I don't think that's a very diversive sort of question, but there's probably some strong opinions from the community, either or, in any direction you
Well,
go.
this is the video game community. There's always going to be strong opinions on everything, but this is one that I personally didn't come down too hard on either side of.
Mm,
Like, you got to be willing to, for a lot of stuff, just take the game as it comes, and just enjoy it as it is. So,
yeah,
yeah, I would have been good with this either way.
yeah, that's it. But yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, that gets us to I guess the end of this or episode 2 of Coffee and Chaos, and yeah. I feel like this is a pretty good chat. Like I like this topic
Yeah,
about lab. I think lab's a pretty interesting
this is
one.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear what people have to say, honestly, in the comments. And that's not like clickbait to like, oh, comment below, but like I'm legitimately curious to hear what other people's thoughts are on this because I don't feel like it gets talked about super often. So yeah,
I think we got some pretty good comments on the last video too. There's some pretty big ones.
we
I
did.
think some peeps really,
Yeah.
and that's what we put these up for. Like it's not to cast shade on anyone or the devs or anything like that. It's just to have a general conversation. Sometimes it would be a bit sort of saucy what we're talking about. And it's to share thoughts and ideas and stuff. It's not saying PoE 1's better than PoE 2 or anything like that. It's just focused on having a bit of conversation, a bit of healthy debate, and then we'll get comments from below. If you guys want to see us do a live podcast of this moving forwards, let me know below or let us know below, and we'll start having a look and see how we do that, and then it'll just be a bit of scheduling. We'll figure that out. But anyway, we'll see you guys in the next one, which I think we'll look at the vision. I like that topic.
Thank you for tuning in. Take it easy.
We'll see you guys later.